A neutral room can be beautiful on paper. Soft plaster walls, pale oak, linen upholstery, woven textures, natural ceramics. All the ingredients sound right, and yet many neutral rooms still feel slightly unresolved when you stand inside them. They are calm but not convincing, pretty but not fully composed. This is one of the most common decorating problems because people assume that a soft palette automatically creates harmony. In reality, neutral rooms need structure, rhythm, contrast. Without those things, the palette starts to blur into itself. Nothing feels wrong exactly, but nothing feels fully settled either. The good news is that unfinished neutral rooms usually do not need more decor. They need a clear decision. Once you understand what is missing, the fix is often quieter and simpler than most people expect. The real problem is usually not the palette itself. When a neutral room feels flat, people blame beige, cream, or white, but the issue is rarely the color. The issue is that neutral rooms rely heavily on subtle forms of contrast. Everything is soft, matte, pale, and visually equal, so the eye has nowhere to rest or nothing to organize around. That's why some neutral rooms feel elevated while others feel vague. The successful ones create hierarchy. They still tell the eye what matters first, second, and third. They still use proportions, spacing, tone, and material differences to create shape. The first sign is that everything sits on the same tonal register. Pale walls, pale sofa, pale rug, pale curtains, pale wood. Nothing interrupts the softness enough to give the room any structure. This doesn't mean that you need a harsh black accent or a dramatic statement piece, but it usually means that the room needs a little more weight. A darker wood side table, a bronze lamp base, a smoked ceramic vessel, a warm brown frame. One deeper tone can make the lighter layers feel more intentional because it gives them something to relate them to. It's about setting a difference between the items in the space, about adding gravity. The second sign is that the room has softness, not rhythm. A room can have lovely individual objects and still feel unfinished if nothing visually echoes across the space. Rhythm is what makes a room feel collected rather than accidental. In a neutral room, rhythm comes often from repeated materials, repeated shapes, repeated tones. If linen, oak, and ceramic appear once each, the room then starts to feel like a set of separate decisions instead of a coherent whole. Repetition helps create calm because it reduces visual randomness. It tells the eye that the room has an internal logic. The third sign is that there's not enough contrast in texture. Many neutral rooms fail because they are too visually smooth. If the sofa, walls, rug, drapery, and accessories all reflect light in the same way, the room starts to feel like one-noted, even when the colors are technically different. Texture is what keeps a restrained palette alive. A matte plaster wall besides a washed linen or woven fiber, dark wood grain, a handmade ceramic that creates quiet variations without requiring more color. The eye reads the material differences even when the palette remains calm. This is also why rooms with one soft upholstered pieces sometimes feel unfinished. They need one tactile interruption, one woven note, one rough ceramic, one object with sharper material decisions. That contrast gives the softness context. The fourth sign is that the room is full, but it has no focal point. Another reason neutral rooms feel unfinished is that they have decor but no anchor. The room contains objects, but nothing quietly gathers the composition. Without a focal point, the eye moves around the space without landing anywhere. The results feel vague rather than serene. A focal point in a neutral room doesn't need to be loud. It can be artwork with tonal depth, it can be a sculptural lamp, a grounding console, a fireplace wall, even a beautifully framed window if the room is allowed to support it. The point is simply to create one place where the room feels the most resolved. When the focal point is clear, then everything can become quieter. That is often what makes the room feel finished. Not more decoration, but more clarity. The fifth sign is that there's no negative space. People often assume that empty spaces mean that something is missing. In reality, negative space is what allows a restrained room to feel more expansive and more intentional. Without it, even the most beautiful objects start to flatten each other. Every surface becomes equally active, every corner asks for attention. In a neutral interior, negative space especially is important because there is less color contrast to separate things cleanly. So the space itself has to do more of the work. A table with one considered object often feels more resolved than a table with 6 nice ones. A wall with one strong frame, it feels calmer than a wall with too many small frames. It's about having structure. So how do you fix an unfinished neutral room? Start by editing it. Stop adding more things. Remove accessories that are merely filling space. Then ask 5 questions. If there's one element with enough tonal weight to ground the room, which is? Is there at least one material repeated clearly enough to create rhythm? Do the textures vary in a way that the eye can feel it? Is there a focal point that quietly organizes the space? Is there enough breathing room for the strongest elements to matter? Usually 1 or 2 of these are missing, and once they are corrected, the room changes quickly. The palette stays soft, the room stays quiet, but is no longer unfinished. The most elegant neutral rooms are not successful because they are pale. They are successful because they are disciplined. They use softness with intention. They understand where to add weight, where to repeat, where to edit, and where to let the space do the work. That's the real fix. Not abandoning neutrals, not chasing stronger colors just for contrast, just giving the room enough structure that the calm palette has something to hold on to. Once that happens, the room stops feeling merely pleasant and it starts feeling finished. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.